Alrighty. Hi all, my name is Rose Foodie. I am one of the Career and Professional Development Advisors here at the Career Center. Today, we're going to talk about our major specific job search, particularly for chemical engineering alumni and folks who studied chemical engineering. With me also today is my colleague Shada. Shada, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, everybody. My name is Shada. I'm a career advisor in the Career Center, and I'm relatively new, so I'm excited to be here and joining and watching.
Thanks, Shada. So I just have some general information up here. If you all are on this call, you probably already know, but you can schedule appointments for virtually or in person through DiggerNet, and we'll talk about how to do that in a little bit. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see where we're located and our contact information. So if you have any follow-ups or want to stop by the office, please feel free to do so. I also will be going through a couple of different topics today, but if you do have questions, feel free to unmute since it's a pretty small group and just express your question. I want this to be catering to your needs, so please do feel free if you have a question to either let us know during, or we can talk about some questions at the end as well. Alrighty. So before I kind of dive into some of the content, as I mentioned, I will be sending a follow-up after this. With that follow-up email, I'll be including the job search roadmap, which is a handout that we give to folks. It can be helpful as a self-analysis tool to just understand what it is you're looking for in a job opportunity. So sometimes it's nice to be able to kind of pause if you're in the middle of a job search and think about kind of what your needs are, what your interests are, and what your goals are related to your job search and your career. So I will be sending that out as a follow-up, but just wanted to give you kind of a sneak preview there. For our agenda, we are going to talk through some specific industry data and trends for chemical engineering folks. Then we're going to dive into how to make a plan and stay organized in your job search, followed by some discussion around networking, LinkedIn, and informational interviewing and how that can be a helpful tool in your job search. And then at the end, I'll show you some resources that we have at the Career Center that might also help you in your job search. So to start, I just want to get a pulse check and understand kind of what brought folks here today. I'm assuming you're all looking for jobs, but what are some things you're hoping to get out of this workshop? Are there particular questions you have or challenges you're facing? So if folks want to either unmute and share, or if you want to share something in the chat as well, either of those would be great. But just looking to hear what are folks hoping to get out of this workshop today?
So I'm going into my senior year, so I want to make sure I'll be able to get a job once I graduate. So my goals are just to try to help refine my job search process so that I can increase my odds of landing that job as soon as I can graduate.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, so I'm in a little bit of an unusual situation, maybe, not sure. I actually do have a job. It's in a related field. I'm working in manufacturing and I have kind of an unorthodox resume. I'm a recent graduate, graduated in May. So I guess I'm kind of looking to see if I can upgrade maybe and get a job more in industry or that's aligned with my major, and kind of get some help approaching that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, John.
Thank you.
Anyone else have expectations? Oh, I believe someone sent something in the chat, so let me look there. All right, applied to 17 jobs, had 2 interviews, all stuff related to either job apps or interviews. Okay, talking more generally about job applications and interviews. Great. So I definitely think we'll touch on the job search as a whole, how to refine that, looking at how you might think about expanding your network and how that might contribute to going into a different potential career path if you're looking to kind of switch trajectories right now or switch industries, and then talking through job applications. We can touch on interviews as well. All right. Let me go back to our PowerPoint here. Great. So to start, we can talk a little bit more about some industry-specific data and trends. I think this can be just helpful to set the stage and understand what the industry is like in terms of job outlook. For chemical engineering, the job outlook actually is pretty great. Over the next 10 years, or from 2021 to 2031, there is anticipated 14% job growth, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And with that, it's helpful to note that on average, that's about double the average for most industries looking for job growth there for most occupations. So that's really great to hear. Median wages are above 100,000, and there is projected salary growth between 2019 and 2023 for 10%. Also considering that chemical engineering is one of the higher paying jobs in terms of engineering. I believe it's ranked 4th there. So that's helpful to know just for some context. And then to think about folks who are just entering the field, we have our Mines Chemie outcomes for our undergraduate students in the 2021-2022 class. We're making 72 on average when they graduated. And for graduate students, it was about 86,000. So those are all things helpful to know. It's also helpful to note that Colorado is in the top 10 of industry-specific states. So for chemical engineering, it's in the top 10 of employing folks for that particular industry. So if you are looking to stay locally, it's definitely up there in terms of states that do have job opportunities related to chemical engineering. Taking a look at ONET Online, which is essentially a database that has all sorts of information on occupations, and it's information that's collected by the government from across the country and across industries. There, if you look at chemical engineering, you can see that some of the hard skills that a lot of these jobs are looking for are very analytical or scientific software. So these are some specifics here. You can see statistical software, MATLAB, things of that nature. It's definitely not limited to that. I know Mines, teaches you a lot of different things, but these are just some examples that ONET provides. A little bit more broadly, we're also looking at mathematics skills, potentially programming skills, as well as data and statistics skills, having a knowledge of how to operate Microsoft Excel, as well as general problem solving skills. We also see that oftentimes these more professional skills or human skills they're looking for include teamwork, communication, leadership, curiosity, and decision-making. So these are all things that if you have those skills, you want to be sure that you're highlighting on your resume. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but when you're specifically applying to different job applications, you want to be making sure that if you have skills that they're listing in the job description, that you're listing those on your resume as well. Because while, these are some common skills that the industry looks for, it's definitely not limited to that, and each position will be specific. And if they're listing that in the job description, it's really important for you to be mentioning if you have those skills in your materials so that they understand the breadth of your skill set. On the right-hand side, you can also see here that we have folks in the past who graduated with chemical engineering degrees from Mines have gone into all of these different industries. So it really shows that chemical engineering is not limited to oil and gas or pharma, for example, but really there are folks needing that across industries. And so, if you're concentrated in one area, that's great. But if you want to broaden your horizons as well, different industries are looking for folks with chemical engineering degrees. So this is a very dense slide, I recognize. So feel free to take a moment and read through some of that. Also, if you'd like the slides after, I can send them. This is a sampling of, in the past, students who have reported their positions with us. This is a list of those position titles as well as some of those companies. So this can be a great place to start if you're not sure what kinds of job titles you should be searching for on company websites, or perhaps creating job search agents for. You might be looking for chemical engineer, but as you can see here, there are a ton of different potential names for those jobs that are looking for folks with a chemical engineering background. As you can see, there are also a number of different companies looking for those folks as well. So again, thinking about not only broadening potentially some of the search terminology we're using to include things like process engineer or technical project manager, manufacturing chemist, for example, but also perhaps broadening which companies we're looking at. If you find that maybe you're not having the most success with your current pool, it could be a good idea to expand and potentially include some of these as well. So now I want to talk about making a plan. So when we think about the job search holistically, it is not linear. It's going to be very cyclical, and it's something that is an ongoing process with a lot of different pieces to it. So oftentimes I suggest that folks start at the self-analysis and goals section. And when we talk about this, this again is going to be guided through that handout that I'll be sharing afterwards, but you really want to reflect on what is it that I am looking for in a potential job or career path. Do I have certain career goals that require me to build certain skills at this point in time? What kind of environment do I want to work in? Where do I want to work? Is salary important? Are benefits important? To what extent, right? So thinking about what are those negotiables and non-negotiables for you, and really being thoughtful about what your goals are for this next step in your job search. Then you want to move into industry and company research once you have a better idea of what it is that you're looking for, so that you can better understand the companies that are out there and start to get an idea of what companies you might want to work for. In doing so, I encourage folks to create job search tools. So these are on company websites. You can also do it on Google Jobs as well as in DiggerNet. You can enter in certain criteria for jobs that you're looking for, and you can make sure that that's aligned with what you're kind of hoping to get emails for in that. So you can explicitly list out exactly what you're looking for there, and then they'll send you emails with relevant jobs as they come up. So this can be a really great way to kind of take off some of the legwork for you during your job search. Then you're going to be applying for those jobs as well. Job applications are a big part of the job search, right? We can't have jobs if we don't apply for them in the first place. So you'll definitely be needing to submit those job applications and following up with those recruiters afterwards if you find that you haven't been hearing back from recruiters. Next, you're going to think about preparing networking skills and those tools, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about that later. And then also we'll encourage you throughout your time to attend recruiting events, things such as career days, of course. So for those of you who are still at Mines, career days is a great event in the fall. For those of you who have graduated, you do still have access to go to career days as well, and all of our campus opportunities. So if there's a company coming to campus for an information session, for example, you can still attend that up to 2 years after your graduation. So I highly encourage you to attend those types of events. They're really great opportunities to get your name out there, get your face out there, and make yourself a little bit of a fish in a smaller pond, if you will, as opposed to just submitting an application blindly and not having maybe a more personal connection with the recruiters. You'll also then have this interview process, and you'll be following up there. So, of course, interviewing is another part of the job search that will come once you've submitted those applications. And we can talk about that a little bit more if you have questions. And then reviewing your contract and deciding if the opportunity is right for you. This might include salary negotiation or offer evaluation, thinking through those benefits. And again, reviewing those non-negotiables that you set and your goals during your self-analysis phase. then you'll be transitioning into your position and building your career, and the cycle kind of continues. So that's just a big picture look at the different components of the job search. And again, these aren't necessarily going to go in order. You might be doing things in a slightly different order, but it is important to know that all of these are important components to a successful job search. So we get the question a lot, what is the best way to find an opportunity? And the answer that I have for that is there's really no one right way, right? We are kind of mixing together all of these different aspects to make sure that we have that successful job search. So as we mentioned, applying online, that's what a majority of students do and think of when they think of the job search. But we're also going to be doing some networking and building our network in industry to develop those connections and learn a little bit more about potential career paths in industry. We'll also be having some direct employer contact, so that may happen at something like an information session, career days and hiring fairs as well. So attending career days at Mines, but also hiring fairs that may happen in the state that you're located in. Also utilizing social media such as LinkedIn, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth later. And then potentially staff agencies and headhunters. Some folks will use these. I would say definitely it seems to be more popular a little bit later on in your career, but if that's something you're interested in, it absolutely can be a part of your job search. So thinking about where to start your search, excuse me. Here are a couple of different options. To start, DiggerNet is a great place to start. Most of you, if not all of you, are probably familiar with DiggerNet to some capacity, but it does have a job board. It is only open to Mines students, and the employers that post jobs there have been vetted by the Mines Career Center staff. So we make sure that any of the jobs that are posted are relevant to our students. And so we definitely encourage you to go there. It can be a great opportunity. Some of the applications are done directly through DiggerNet, so it really makes that pool a much smaller search pool again and helps you stand out a little bit more. There are also great opportunities to apply to, even if they're directing you to their company website to apply, because they're specifically looking for Mines students if they've reached out to us and asked us to post that. So it's a really awesome tool to know that there's an employer that sees the value of a Mines education and has that relationship. So I definitely encourage you to look on DiggerNet. You can set up those search agents I referred to before on DiggerNet to be able to get those emails and be notified when jobs are posted. So that's one place you can look for these jobs. Indeed and LinkedIn are also great places to look for positions, as are a multitude of different online platforms. I would say Google as well is a sneaky great online platform for job search. If you just Google jobs, you can actually come up with this job search platform and create job filters similarly to LinkedIn or DiggerNet. And Google will actually pull from places like Indeed, LinkedIn, and across the internet. So that can be another really great place to create that search and get those emails every time relevant opportunities arise. Company websites are also a great place to look. So if you have companies that you know you're interested in, I would recommend setting up job search alerts on those company websites so that you're able to get emails whenever jobs pop up there. And we're always going to recommend that when you're applying to these jobs, you are applying directly on the company websites. If you're applying through somewhere like LinkedIn or Indeed, it may be a little easier up front. However, you're going through multiple applicant tracking systems because of that, as opposed to just going through the company's applicant tracking system, which is why we encourage folks to apply directly through the company website. Is there anywhere else that folks have found to be helpful for them in their job search that they'd like to share?
I know in my personal case, most of the job opportunities that I've ever gotten have been through direct connection with people, which is another reason why I'm here. I have never really had any success applying without any connection whatsoever to a company or organization.
Yeah, that's a really great point. data shows that between 75 and 80% of jobs are related to a person having some sort of a connection with a company. So might not be directly something that they've gotten through networking, but oftentimes that is a big part of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about the role that networking can play in the job search for sure. Okay, and I also just saw a question in the chat here from Brandon. Jobs ask, what is your expected salary? So what should I say? How do I calculate what I should tell them? It's a great question. We recommend at the Career Center trying not to be the first person to give that number, which can be difficult sometimes. So I recognize that. So if you're able to, you can deflect the question and essentially indicate that whatever is budgeted for the position is something that you're willing to work with, or you're sure that that will suit you. Something to the effect of you'd rather find out more details about the job before you're able to commit to giving a salary expectation, things of that nature that you can say to deflect that question. If they're persistent, or if you feel inclined to share that with them, I encourage you before an interview to have an idea of what your salary range and your salary expectations are. One way that I think is really helpful for folks to do that is by looking at salary.com, payscale.com, as well as Glassdoor. It can have some good information too. And the Minds annual report, which can be found on the Career Center website as well. All of those resources will have salary information. So Minds is going to be specific to folks who graduated last year, or in this case, 2021, 2022. And so you can see what folks with your degree graduated with and what the average salary was there. Whereas payscale.com, salary.com, and Glassdoor are going to be a little bit more specific, where you can enter a job title, you can enter the location of that job, you can enter your education, and based on that, it will populate what the general bell curve is for that salary data for that position in that particular location with, the same credentials that you have. So I encourage you to use those resources. They are all a little bit different. So, use all three of them to try and understand what the market rate is. And then you can use that to understand what your range is based on market rate. And I encourage folks, if you're going to give them a range, to actually start by sharing kind of that expectation that you have. So whatever that hopeful salary is as the bottom of that range, and then you can stretch that range to about 10% above that. So I hope that is helpful there. Okay, great questions. So I'm going to just get these all up on the screen for a second here. So as I've talked through, these are kind of the different steps that you may need to take in your job search in order to have a comprehensive job search. So I just encourage you all to reflect independently. Which of these do you feel confident in? And are there any that you might need to spend more time on, right? We're going to talk more in depth about networking and how that fits into the job search. I think that's oftentimes one where folks feel they have the least experience perhaps, or they maybe don't dedicate as much time as they do to using their resume and tailoring that, or submitting a cover letter, for example. So I just encourage you to think about all of these different steps in your own job search and think about where you might need to spend additional time in order to make sure that you're getting the most out of your job search. So I'll give you just a moment to think about that. I see you've got something in the chat. How much time should we spend on each of these? How many hours should one spend writing a custom cover letter, customizing resumes for any given job? Another great question. I would say it definitely depends on the person. I mean, everyone is going to work at a slightly different pace, so there's no one size fits all answer for that. But what I would say is you do want to be making sure that you're spending time customizing your resumes or tailoring your resumes for each job, as well as your cover letter. I think it's helpful to kind of start with a base or a core resume or a core cover letter, and then use the job description as a guide to be tailoring that resume. You do need to pump out a number of job applications in order to have success in the job search, right? You can't just apply to one job. You likely won't just get one job from one application, but you also want to balance quantity versus quality. If you're just submitting applications through LinkedIn, using the easy application button, or perhaps if you're just submitting the same resume, but you're not tailoring it to match the job description and the language in the job description, you're not going to have as much success. So you might be sending out a lot of job applications, but you might not necessarily be getting that success in return because of the quality of the application. So I do think it's something that it depends on your own capacity and how much time you have to dedicate to the job search. But also I would encourage you to be thoughtful with each of these applications and find that balance between quantity and quality as well. Okay. So next, I want to talk about staying motivated throughout the search, because the search can be a long process and we recognize that. So we have a couple of tips on how to kind of stay organized, set realistic goals, and seek accountability so that you're staying on task, even if this takes weeks or months, perhaps, to find a job. So one tip that I give to everyone at the beginning of their job search is to start off with an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheet, some form of organization that works for you. So this might look a little bit different for everyone, and really organize yourself so that you can keep track of just what applications you're applying to and how many you're applying to. So for example, in this one, we've got position title, the name of the company you've applied to, the industry, if you are applying to multiple industries, and that could help if you have a couple of different kind of templates for your cover letters, depending on industry, right? So that might be helpful. Location, the date that you applied, what materials you submitted for that, how interested you are, and then explaining your rating. So giving it a couple of notes on why it is you're interested in this position. I also encourage folks to include the link to the job application in this, especially if you're using this throughout your job search to kind of organize and prioritize which applications you're submitting. So maybe you haven't submitted it yet, but you want to save that in one spot so that you can make sure you're prioritizing based on deadline. And I also think that adding a networking section or a networking column to a spreadsheet like this can be really helpful, because you might reflect on a company that you're applying for and realize that you know someone who works there. And so it might be helpful for you to reach out to that person in your application process to talk with them about your application. And that could potentially help you as you apply. You may be able to get a referral or perhaps some tips on the application itself. So that's why I encourage folks to also have that networking column here. In addition to staying organized and using a spreadsheet to do so, I encourage folks to come up with a way to have goals in your search. So obviously, the end goal of a job search is to get a job, right? That is the end goal. But because that's only kind of a one-time goal, there's only one job there, sometimes it can be hard if you aren't reaching that goal, after weeks or months. So you need to set some smaller goals, perhaps, to work toward achieving the ultimate goal of getting a job. So one way some folks will do that is a point system. So you can set goals for yourself based on those points. So for every new person you talk to, for example, they might be worth 2 points. And then your goal is every week by Sunday to reach 10 points. points, right? This is going to look a little bit different for everyone, but for some folks, this is going to be a helpful way to kind of keep track and make sure that you're dedicating enough time to the job search. And then for other folks, literal time is helpful for them to make sure they're holding themselves accountable and motivating themselves. So if you set a specific time frame for each week that you're planning to work on that job search, you know, for example, you can say Monday through Friday, I'm going to spend 2 hours a day looking for jobs or networking, or perhaps I'm going to spend 10 hours total this week, and I'm going to log that time and really make sure that I'm being honest with myself about the time spent. So I think that either of these systems can work be really helpful for folks. Other systems can work as well, depending on what motivates you. But you really want to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable, because we do find sometimes that students after a long job search start to lose that motivation, and then perhaps don't apply to as many jobs or don't spend as much time networking, things like that. So we want to make sure that you find a way to hold yourself accountable. And after all of that is done, once you've met those goals, we definitely encourage you to rest, recharge. The job search can be stressful, it can be exhausting. So we want to also make sure that you're taking care of yourself and setting aside time to do that. So once you've hit those goals, you know, whether it's a point system or a time system, being able to take a break from the job search and recognize that it's not something you need to do every hour of every day. We also want to talk kind of holistically about these 3 components. So looking for opportunities, as we've talked about, you're going to search for those jobs, tailor your resumes and write your cover letters, then actually submitting all of that in the job application, and then eventually getting interviews there. You also want to work on growing your network, which again, we'll get to in a moment, finding new connections, sending messages and doing some informational interviews there. And then taking care of yourself. And these are just some examples on how you can take care of yourself during the job search there. But all 3 of these components are really necessary to have a successful and sustained job search. So just thinking about some next steps before we dive into some of the networking portion of today's workshop. So be realistic with yourself and your goals. So think about how can you make tangible, manageable goals that are realistic for you and the amount of time that you have personally to dedicate to your job search. Are there folks that can help you to hold yourself accountable? Maybe that's someone at the Career Center or a family member or a friend. But think about, you know, do you have someone in your network that can help you in the job search in that way? And then again, that self-analysis piece, thinking about what are you really looking for in a job search? What are you willing to compromise perhaps or negotiate? And at what point are you willing to negotiate them? Perhaps you set a certain date if you're really trying to keep to a timeline to find a job, a certain date that you reevaluate some of those non-negotiables and think about what you might be willing to compromise on. All right. Before I jump into networking, I see we've got another question here. How do we meet people? That segues perfectly into our next section here. So I'll continue on there and I think I'll get to your question. So there are a couple of different ways to kind of build your network and to think about how you meet people in industry and kind of grow that network. So to start, when you think of your network is comprised of folks from all over. So it's going to include your friends, your classmates. It'll include your faculty members that you've had, staff members that you've worked with, folks like us at the Career Center. It might be family friends. They could be past coworkers or bosses that you've had. You know, your network can expand beyond just someone who you've worked with in an internship, for example. So I like to encourage folks to think holistically about who's in your network. And again, in that handout that I'll send as a follow-up, we do have an exercise to get you to think through who's in your network and who are some of those relationships that you might be able to tap into in your job search. We're also going to talk about how you can use LinkedIn to connect with folks who can be helpful in building your network, and then how you can make those conversations fruitful for you. So LinkedIn, for kind of a quick version of LinkedIn can be a really helpful professional social media tool to learn more about companies you're interested in, stay connected with those companies, learn about job opportunities with companies as they advertise them on LinkedIn. But you also are able to utilize LinkedIn to kind of market yourself and to connect with other folks. So that might be people that you already know. It might be people that you're hoping to meet as well. And we can talk about how you engage with those folks. So just a couple of things. You want to make sure that on your LinkedIn, if you have one, that you're seeking work and it's known that you're seeking work. There's actually a little box that you can check that says you're seeking employment. You're able to expand on your experiences and achievements. So the great thing about LinkedIn is that it's not limited to one page like a resume, but rather you can add a lot of detail to that. So you're able to add that detail in LinkedIn and add other experiences that perhaps you couldn't fit on your resume. That includes projects as well. You're also not going to want to enter any personal information, as folks can message you directly through the application. You can offer recommendations and endorsements as just a way of connecting with folks that you do already know. You can search for connections using the advanced search tool, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And you can add all of your skills on LinkedIn. This is going to be helpful if recruiters are actively searching for folks, because they are going to be searching for folks with particular skill sets, and they can kind of put that into their search tool. And then you'll pop up if you meet that search tool and meet the skills that they have. But if they're not on your profile, then you're not going to show up. So make sure that you're adding those skills that you have. You can even take some certifications for things. Python's one that comes to mind, but there are a couple of other certifications as well. So if you're really trying to show that you have certain technical skills, there's that opportunity as well. So on the right-hand side of the screen, this blue box, you can see a sample LinkedIn message to Minds alumni. This, I think, can be a really great way to kind of break the ice and introduce yourself to a Minds alumni that you're hoping to have an informational interview with. And so I'll talk in a moment about how you find those alumni, but you really want to draw that connection with them, that you're also either a Minds student or a Minds alumni. You have that connection with them and you recognize that, and that you want to learn more about what it is that they're doing. We want to be leading with curiosity in this case. We're not going to be telling them that we need a job or asking them for a job, but rather we're going to be asking to have a conversation with them to learn more about what it is that they do and learn more about their company. So this is how you can go about finding those folks on LinkedIn. So you would search a company in the search bar. So in this case, Halliburton is what we've searched. If you want, you see this follow button here. So you could follow them if you were interested. That means that you'll be getting things on your feed from them. So job postings, articles they're posting, things like that. So a great way to stay engaged with that company. And then you can go down to the People tab, which we have right here, People, and search Colorado School of Mines. When you search Colorado School of Mines, it's going to narrow down their employees. So in this case, you've gone from 59,000 down to 127 folks that work or went to Mines and work at Halliburton. And then you'll be able to, these are screenshots, so I can't do it right now, but in LinkedIn, you're able to scroll down below that and you can see all of the folks who listed that they went to Colorado School of Mines and currently work at Halliburton, so that you're able to then send a connection request to them and type in that message that we just talked through. Or you can send them a message directly if you're already connected with them and introduce yourself as a fellow Minds alum and ask to chat. So that is one way of finding folks that aren't already in your network, but perhaps they're working at a company that you want to work at or working in a role that you're really interested in. It's a really great way to learn more information and then develop that relationship with the person. So what does that conversation look like, right? We call this informational interviewing. Sometimes folks call it career conversations, but this is really an informal conversation with a professional who's working, again, in a company you're interested in or in a role you're interested in. So you're going to ask a lot of questions in this conversation, right? You're not going to necessarily ask for a job, but you're going to really just learn more as much as you can and express interest as much as you can in conversation. So you'll gain knowledge on the career and the organization. You're going to build your network by developing that rapport with this person. You may be able to ask for some advice on your resume or perhaps on tips on getting your foot in the door with this industry. And sometimes this can result in job leads. So oftentimes we see this might not pay off immediately. Sometimes it does. And sometimes a couple weeks or months down the road, this may help you in your job search a little bit more directly. So a couple of tips regarding these conversations. Be direct about how it is that you know them. Maybe you found them through some research that you came across that you found interesting and you want to chat with them because of that. So letting them know that that's how you came across their information. If someone else, perhaps you have a coworker or a colleague or a friend who introduced you to them, mentioning that person that you have a connection with so that they know kind of how you know them. Or like we said before, if they were a Minds alumni that you've looked up on LinkedIn, being able to reach out and say that you're also a Minds alumni looking to get connected. Also make sure that you're preparing your questions in advance and doing a little bit of research so that you come prepared to the conversation, ready to ask questions and ready to be intentional with the time that you're taking from them. You can reiterate your goals and take notes. So making sure that you're walking away with this conversation, remembering what you chatted about, and to make sure that you're getting what you want to get out of the conversation. So being intentional about those goals. A great question to start is tell me about your career journey. Folks can take that in all kinds of directions, but it's a really great place to start because folks can talk about how it is that they came to be in their position. And that might bring up some other questions for you or give you some ideas on how you can shape your personal career. Definitely keep an awareness of the time as you want to be respectful of their time. If you ask for 20 or 30 minutes, make sure you're sticking to that and make sure that that person's still okay with that. And then wrapping up by asking them if they have anyone else that they think would be helpful for you to chat with. This is kind of the power of networking, that you might connect with one person and hit it off, and then they're able to connect you with someone else that will be really helpful that you may not have met before if you hadn't had this connection. So definitely feel free to ask that. And then making sure we're sending a thank you follow-up email within 24 hours just to express our gratitude and to keep that relationship and that rapport going. All right, any questions before I jump into these job resources? Okay, I will continue on with our job resources then. All righty. So I did mention DiggerNet. I will reiterate that this can be a really great resource in your job search. So make sure your account is updated. We can have employers come to us and say, can you please provide a resume bundle of folks with chemical engineering degrees, for example? And so we're only able to do that if your profile is updated to have a complete and relevant resume, and it says that we are allowed to share that with employers. So I encourage you to go into your account, make sure that's updated. And then I also encourage you to set some of those job search parameters that I was talking about before. So especially with Career Day starting to come in September, we'll be having more and more jobs posted in DiggerNet. So if you're able to set those job searches now, it's going to save you some time because you're going to be able to continue to get those notifications as jobs come out. There's also an employer directory. So you can actually search employers, excuse me, by name, location, and industry. These are employers that don't necessarily have jobs open at this very moment. They may, but they also might just have employers on there that we've worked with in the past. So there's a little over 8,000 employers in our directory at the current moment. We've worked with them at some point in time, so they know Minds, they recognize Minds as a great institution to hire from. So you can use that employer directory to search for companies in industry that you might not have thought of before. And then you can find potentially some contacts there. If they do have jobs posted in DiggerNet, you'll be able to see that under the employer directory as well. And you can then take those contacts or take that information that you've learned from the directory and go look at their company websites to do a little bit more research, or perhaps set job searches on their actual websites. So it can be a really great place if you find that you've kind of exhausted all your resources. You don't really know what other employers to look at. I would encourage you to look at the employer directory. And then you can also keep an eye on events. Obviously, you all knew about this event, which is a workshop. We will also be having information sessions, which are when employers come to campus and they talk to folks. Usually it's a much smaller group than Career Day. So usually between 20 and 50 students will show up, but it's open to everyone. You can come. Usually there's free food and they talk about what it is that their company does, what positions they might have open. And it's a really great opportunity if you attend those to go up and introduce yourself so that you can make sure that they know who you are. And so that if they do see your application, they can remember you as the person they met rather than just another application. So all things that you can find in DiggerNet, and I would encourage you to take advantage of. You can also schedule counseling appointments in DiggerNet. So even if you've graduated, you do still have access to counseling appointments for the next 2 years. So if you'd like to meet with a career advisor, you can just go to this counseling button at the upper right-hand corner of your profile. You can see right here, click that, and you can look and see all of the availability for the different advisors. There are a number of us, and we all have varied availability for in-person and virtual appointments. So I would definitely encourage you, if you do have further questions after today, to schedule an appointment with an advisor. We're all happy to meet with you and talk about the various components of your job search. We can do a resume review or a cover letter review, practice interviewing, all of that. So if that's something that interests you, I encourage you to do that as well. Thinking a little bit more about LinkedIn, our colleague Bryce has actually found this resource. The former LinkedIn employees, the job insiders as they call themselves, do offer some resources to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is kind of the best it can be. And so if you scan this QR code that's on the screen here, you'll be able to see their profile checklist, as well as potentially get your LinkedIn reviewed and graded in that way based on that checklist. So this can just be helpful if you're trying to dive a little bit more into LinkedIn as you begin to utilize that as a networking tool to make sure that you're kind of checking all of those boxes and have an updated and comprehensive LinkedIn account. JobScan can also be a really helpful tool for folks. So I've talked a little bit about applicant tracking systems. These are the systems that companies use on their websites to essentially do a first pass at your application materials before they go to a human being, that being someone in the recruiting team. And so a lot of companies are using applicant tracking systems to parse through resumes and materials just to make it a little bit more manageable for their recruiting team. So this is why it's really important to be able to tailor your resume based on the language in the job description so that you're able to score well enough on these applicant tracking systems so that your application is actually reviewed by a human. JobScan essentially is a simulator of that. And so you can put in a job description as well as your resume or cover letter, and you're able to see how well it matches and how you would have scored on an applicant tracking system. It also offers suggestions on things you might change or edit in order to increase that match rate. So it can be a really helpful tool in that way. If you are interested in JobScan, I encourage you to scan this QR code. You'll be able to request an account, and we are able to provide students with free accounts and alumni up to 2 years as well. But you just need to make it through the Career Center, so you can either scan this QR code or go through our website. But definitely another helpful tool. And then I just want to touch on InnerStride. I'm not sure if anyone here is an international student or is interested in working abroad, but InnerStride is another tool that we offer at the Career Center. You can visit innerstride.com and then log in with the student login, your Minds email address, set a password, and then you have access to a whole host of information on working abroad, including visa and immigration information, where to look for jobs in different countries, what opportunities there are. And there are a lot of webinars that talk very specifically about an international job search. So if that's something that interests you, this can also be a helpful tool. And again, you can find all of these resources on our website. I'll let anyone who wants to scan that as well. Take a moment to scan that. All right. And so I leave you with this. I challenge you all to think about one thing that you can do related to your job search in the next 24 to 48 hours. You don't need to share that with me, but I would encourage you to think about what is one thing that maybe you haven't been doing, or one thing that you can change and add to your job search process in the next 24 to 48 hours that will help you to start achieving that, whether that's updating a part of your LinkedIn profile or perhaps tailoring a resume for a job you're looking at. It might look different for everyone, but I challenge you to think about what that thing is for you, just to keep going in your job search and to kind of take that next step. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we do have about 10 minutes left. So I would be happy to answer any questions that folks have that we didn't quite answer during this session. So feel free to throw them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask them if you have those questions as well. If folks don't have questions, that's okay too. If you did come in late and you'd like to send me your email so that I can send that follow-up email, please feel free to send me a direct message. I will stop our recording now.